mean, the president of the United States gets up on a videotape that's going to go all over the world and says Trump's ducking him on debates. And it's 100% false. But that just makes my point that these two, and I'm sorry, but Donald Trump embellishes and exaggerates. You know he does. Everybody knows. Not to the extent that Biden does. I think Biden leads the league in that, but that's just my opinion. All right, go ahead. So you were caught by surprise, as I was, and now you say.
Well, let's see if he even actually shows up to do it. I think that it shows sort of the desperation and the current state of affairs with his campaign right now, with his plummeting poll numbers. I think he had to do something to show that he cannot hide from the president before he hid in the basement. We had a lockdown, a bunch of things going on. So he really was able to avoid that. They wrote a little nice speech for him there. I get it. Human beings are prone to hyperbole, but so they're both maybe going to exaggerate a little bit. But what's factually accurate is President Trump would love and is relishing the idea to debate Joe Biden. Joe Biden doesn't have the stamina. He doesn't have the cognitive ability to be able to go forward and debate President Trump in a meaningful way. Now, as it relates to your idea, which I think is very interesting, and I love this as a former prosecutor, and yes, I used to do Is It Legal? Very highly rated segment on the O'Reilly Fact every Tuesday. Fact check them. Yeah, do the 10-minute intermission and then come back with the facts and say, hey, this is where you made a statement. It's sort of like a Pinocchio thing. And when you were doing your memo and talking about it, you say, well, who can they get? There is no one. There is no talent left in the building at CNN. I'm not sure at what prehistoric time there was talent there, but it's certainly not there now. I don't know who's going to be able to control either one of them, quite frankly. I mean, you know the president a long time, President Trump, that is, and he's a very commanding presence. You saw when he debated Hillary Clinton, he was walking around on the stage. They couldn't control him. He's moving around. It was actually quite funny to see. And Hillary was like, silent screaming inside because she found it very unnerving. I know you could handle it. And that's a funny story about Roger Ailes, because I 100% could hear him saying that. I'm thinking, well, if O'Reilly did a debate, guess what? No,
I could handle it. But I want to I'll throw out a couple of names of other people so that people know where I'm coming from and where you're coming from, because we're professionals. This is inside baseball. The late Tim Russert could have absolutely done this. He worked for NBC Meet the Press. And the late Mike Wallace at CBS, 60 Minutes, absolutely could have done it, okay, because these are men, or were men, people, all right? I think Barbara Walters, if she wanted to, which she wouldn't because she didn't like to get into controversy, might have been able to do it. But you have to look them in the eye and say, even if you favor one or the other. Now, I favor Donald Trump for re-election. My audience knows that, okay? Because I have to tell them, and I have on the No Spin News, why. I think Joe Biden's the second worst president in the history of the United States. And I'll back that up in my upcoming book, Confronting the Presidents. But anyway,
who's number one?
Even though I want Biden to lose because he's damaging the country in ways that people don't even understand yet, I have to treat him fairly. I can't go in the tank for Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump, as I just pointed out, says inflation under Biden's 50% when it isn't, I have to say that. All right. But at CNN, it's not a matter of these people being in the tank. They're not MSNBC. I mean, that's the absolute worst. CNN just doesn't have the skill set, the people over there to do it. I mean, I think that Erin, what's her name, is probably the best of them. She's on at 7 o'clock. But I mean, I'm looking at the roster and I don't see anybody there who could possibly run this debate so the American people benefit. See, the candidates shouldn't. That's what the moderators should be doing. We don't care what the candidates, I mean, the partisans do. Now, here's another question for you. Even before the debate happens, and we assume it's going to happen on the 27th of June, 80% of the country has already decided who won. even before they turn on the television. So no matter what Trump does, the MAGA people go, Trump won a debate. And no matter what Biden does, even if he collapses on the stage, they'll say Trump had a secret potion and that's why he collapsed. But it's the 20% in the middle who don't know who are going to make the decision. And that's the importance of these debates.
I totally agree, because that's where it is. That's a sweet spot, that 20%, the people that are undecided, the independents that are looking to make a decision. There's people out there that are saying, you know what, I'm going to put, my family first over partisan politics and my party. And I want to see which one of these people that can actually lead the country out of this economic and financial abyss that we're in, with a lack of any kind of superiority in national security, foreign policy. America is definitely not safe these days. It was much safer, far less geopolitical conflict under President Trump. And so I think people are looking at all these things. And I think
they're going to, but I hope they get it, because I'm not confident that CNN can bring this off. But I believe if Trump is reelected, that he'll make a deal with Putin. I believe that. Biden has no shot. No shot.
No, because Biden,
but Trump
no one takes him seriously. You have to actually have fear.
He and Putin have some weird thing going on that nobody knows about. Okay. Now, there is a possibility that if Trump is elected in November, you will get a cabinet position or be offered one. Which cabinet position would you want?
Look, I'm open-minded on the best way I can maximize impact to this country.
All right, but tell me where you think your talents would be best used.
I'll tell you one of the things, a couple of the areas where I focused immensely on the campaign. Two areas. You can think about it as two sets of mass deportation. The first mass deportation I think we need in this country is anybody who's in this country illegally needs to be returned to their country of origin.
So you want to be Homeland Security Chief?
Stop. We can talk about the positions, but that's objectives of what needs to be accomplished in the next administration. Do I think we need a better successor to Mayorkas? Absolutely. But there's also the second mass deportation. What do you want to do, Vivek?
Come on.
Well, I want to change this country, but I want to be the president, which is why I ran.
You know
and
yourself.
The second thing I want to do, this is actually really important, is the mass deportation of federal bureaucrats out of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So playing a major role in either draining.
Why are you dodging this question? It's such an easy question.
The reality is
where would your talents be best used if Trump is considering you? What department? Come on.
Either draining the swamp or protecting our border and mass deporting illegals.
All right.
The number one objective that we're going to have, though, is winning the election this November. And I'll be respectful of the conversations I've had with him. But I think what I want to focus on here is how do we actually achieve the mission?
All right. So you and Trump are compatible because he supports the Supreme Court's decision. But what about states like Idaho and some others who are going to make it very, very difficult to have an abortion? And sometimes, in my opinion, and I am pro-life because I'm a Roman Catholic, and unlike Joe Biden, I'm going to follow the tenets of what I believe Christianity is all about. That's my choice. But I do know that in Idaho and other states, even if the woman is severely impacted physically, it's going to be hard for her to have an abortion. Where do you come down on that?
Well, this is an issue that's before the Supreme Court currently. I was just learning more and reading more about the case as it's being argued now. Again, this is such a complex conversation and issue, and it needs to be happening at the state level where it is closest to those being impacted. The issues that Idaho is bringing forward to the Supreme Court now, I think are very telling. I got to be honest, I'm still learning more about the facts. I've listened to some of the arguments, and I'm looking more at the facts of what's happening there versus the rhetoric that's being presented.
This is what you said May 16th, 2022. Go.
What we do know is that the Biden administration has failed to clearly define any objective in this proxy war in Ukraine. They have failed to define what winning looks like. So clearly there is no end in sight without that being defined.
Okay, so I've been very clear, and the Biden administration is not clear on anything. But if you listen to Blinken and Sullivan, they basically say we ought to stop Putin. We're not going to beat Putin militarily. But British intelligence this week reported Putin's losing 1,000 men dead every day in Ukraine. 1,000. And his position in his own country and in the world is much weaker than it was 2 years ago. So that's the end game, to make it impossible for Putin to expand his totalitarianism. The man is a murderer. He's a killer, okay? And to send a message to Xi and other tyrants that this will not be tolerated in the world. So am I wrong because I continue to support American aid to Ukraine?
It still is, there is still not a clear end state. At what point is that defined? They say they want to stop Putin, stop him from being able to extend his incursions, whether it's in Ukraine or in other countries. At what point is that defined? At what point do we stop sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine? At what point do the Ukrainian people find peace in their own country and stop seeing the killing and death of their own people?
You can't be a predictor of that. My feeling is if Trump's reelected, he'll make a deal with Putin, okay, because they have some kind of relationship that nobody understands. But I think that has a much better chance if Trump is president than Biden. But it's like the Cold War. How long did the Cold War go on? From 1945 until Reagan knocked it back 30 years later. And what were you going to say? We're not going to stop Soviet expansion because we don't have any end game? This is the same thing, is it not?
It requires even our own military leaders here in the U.S. at the highest levels, even those who work in the foreign policy arena, many of them, not all, have conceded for months now that the only way that this war ends is with a negotiated outcome.
Yeah, but Putin has to negotiate. It's like Hamas.
Correct.
Hamas doesn't want to negotiate. Yes. Putin doesn't want to negotiate. You got to make it so painful for him.
That's not completely true. There have been efforts put forward by leaders of other countries where they've been able to get parties from Russia and from Ukraine together to the table. And the Biden administration has stopped every one of those efforts from proceeding and continuing on. And ultimately, it is the Ukrainian people who are suffering as a result.
I don't know if that's true. Here's what I know is true. Pope Francis...
The former Prime Minister of Israel was one of those people who spoke very clearly about his knowledge of the Biden administration and leaders in the West standing in the way of a negotiated peace treaty.
It does Joe Biden no good not to try to bring this to an end, which is why I'm skeptical of that report. But Pope Francis...
But he's doing a lot of things that don't make sense and are not doing any good.
But Pope Francis himself, some emissary to Putin, said, I will broker the peace. And Putin told him to get stuffed. Okay, so that's true. That happened. I know that to be a fact. Now, let's get on to the other soundbite. As you might know, I wrote a book called Killing the Killers, which went all through Obama and Trump's war against, talk about an unending war, against Islamic terrorism, okay? Here's what you said on January 3rd, 2020, about the assassination of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard leader Soleimani. Go.
This was very clearly an act of war by this president without any kind of authorization or declaration of war from Congress, clearly violating the Constitution. It further escalates this tit for tat that's going on and on and on, will elicit a very serious response from Iran and pushing us deeper and deeper into this quagmire. And it really begs the question, for what?
So you're criticizing Trump there for waxing Soleimani. Do you stand by that, or have you changed your opinion?
Well, as you see, my point there was that this was an act of war that Congress did not declare. That was the main point there. I believe strongly in the separation of powers. Why not?
You can't fight the war on terror by getting congressional approval for actions that have to take place like that. Baghdadi and ISIS, all of those things. Even Osama bin Laden's assassination was not approved by Congress. Surely you didn't object to that.
Congress, I supported. I was not in office at the time, but have spoken out and supported the continuance of those authorities that Congress did pass, the authorization to use military force to go after Al-Qaeda and those terrorist organizations that came after us on 9/11 and that have popped up and continued to morph into different groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and so forth. I've been very outspoken about the need for a defeat radical Islamist terrorism.
Okay,
the difference and distinction there on the war powers is this was a high
you.
general in the Iranian military.
Yeah,
that is a different.
But he was a designated terrorist because he killed civilians. The War Powers Act that Bush the younger signed gives the authority to the president to do it. He had the authority to kill Soleimani al-Baghdadi. Obama had the authority to kill bin Laden. But I think you would, once you get into that office and you get the national security briefings every day, I believe, because I think you're a very smart woman and you know the big picture, you've got to fight that war that way. You get a chance to take out the leader of Hamas, you don't go to Congress. You take them right off the map. You have to do it that way. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that you are a big, big Trump supporter. But when you hear that from the Democrats, and that's going to be their pitch, that the Biden has done so much for the economy, we're all better off now. How would you, if you were Trump's main economic advisor, reply to that?
I just simply not reply to it. I wouldn't even pay attention to it. No one is going to listen to Joe Biden in his current condition. He's falling in every poll that is at least semi-respected in this country. And the president right now has a groundswell of support across the board. I wouldn't even pay attention to the man, no matter what he said. I'd talk about his record. I'd talk about the condition our condition is in, economically, societally, politically, governmentally. We are right now on the cusp of a failed state, for crying out loud. Why?
Define that. Why do you think we're on the cusp of a failed state? What is the big driver of failure, in your opinion?
In my opinion, having a 2,000-mile long border that's been turned over by Joe Biden to the Mexican drug cartels,
okay.
Bill.
All right. So the border issue. But I think there's an opportunity here for the Republicans and Trump. When you hear a guy like Hakeem Jeffries say, oh, no, Biden's doing a great job with the economy, much better than Trump. And then you price compare at the grocery store. That's all you have to do is price compare, because that's where people feel the economy, at the grocery store and at the gas tank.
And
so why would you not engage at that level? Just put on a full screen. Gallon of milk cost this in the last year of Trump's term. Now it costs this. Eggs cost this. Now it costs that. Why wouldn't you take advantage of that?
I certainly would bring that up, but I wouldn't do it in response to Joe Biden or pay any attention to his defense of hyperinflation, which we're on the cusp of again. Nor would I listen to him when he talks about the state of the economy. We're looking at an economy that has grown nicely over the last year, despite calls of recession. But here's the reality. The reality is we have an economy that's $29 trillion. We have a national debt that has grown to almost, and will approach now, $37 trillion. That's a pretty big issue for the voters, because we're looking at high rates, the prospects of high inflation, slowing growth, and the reality that stagflation
but it's not real to them. All of those terms aren't real to them. What's real to them is they're paying more for their health insurance, they're paying more for their house insurance, their car insurance, they're paying more for everything. Okay, I mean, stagflation and debt, national debt, it just rolls off. But I think you can make it. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. What doesn't roll off is the fact that they're the ones paying those prices.
Right.
They're the ones paying $4 plus for gasoline. They're the ones who's watching house prices go up while you can't finance a house if you want to buy it. You're looking at tremendously higher rates and the prospect of even higher rates, because we've got idiots in the Federal Reserve who are going to try, instead of adjusting their targets, they're going to try to raise rates. And that means unemployment. And that means more dissatisfaction.
All right. But you just mentioned a key word. Now, Biden's going to go out and say it's the lowest unemployment rate, job seekers, all this in history. And he's got the data to back that up. So it's what, 3-point-something%. You want to work in America, you can work. So how do you reply to that?
I don't have to, because everybody can feel it. I'm going to talk to the anxieties that Americans are feeling right now. I'm going to talk to the issue of the middle class, working men and women and their families. Those are Trump's people. That is the so-called forgotten Americans of 2016, but who are the majority of Americans as we look toward November 5th of 2024. We are talking about a real disaster. This is not something you can triangulate. This is not something anybody can play with. We have in this country right now great fear. Every poll shows it. Anxiety, fear. They don't trust the media, for crying out loud. How could they not trust the national corporate media? But it's down to the lowest that it's been in.
Yeah, no, but they simply are in disarray over there. Why is unemployment so low?
Why is it so low? Because we were watching right now a labor market in which people are refusing to participate. They don't want to be a part of it.
So you think they're just not, they're off the grid, they're just not telling anybody what their employment status is. That's what you think?
That's a big part of it. But a bigger part of it is we're watching layoffs like we haven't seen since the last.
It's still below 4% unemployment.
Unemployment is, but the reality is that is rising from levels. We were in the 2% level. We are now looking at 4% and rising. And the job creation and layoff, job creation is declining. Layoffs are escalating. And if we don't have an intelligent response by the Federal Reserve and keep Joe Biden away from bringing in any further illegal alien labor, we can get through to November 5th. But
right. Well, the illegal alien labor is already here. And that, the real wages have still were much higher under Trump. And that's, again, what I would go out with Trump.